Good afternoon, Sector 001. I'm TJ Yesnak, your host for Jupiter Station, a Star Trek podcast. And today's guest needs no introduction. We know her from the Next Generation episode that she's known for, and she had a cameo appearance in Season 3 of Star Trek Picard. Without further ado, let's welcome Elizabeth Denehy.
Hello.
Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you for taking time out.
No problem. Thanks for inviting me.
So I think the thing everybody's been dying for me to ask you is, how did it feel to reprise your role after almost 30 years?
It felt like about time. I was very chuffed. I was very flattered to be asked back, and yeah, it was really, really sweet, especially because it was right after everything was shut down for the pandemic and nobody was working and nothing was happening. So it was very sweet.
And I'm sure that other guests that I've interviewed have said that the Star Trek family is exactly that. It is such a family, and I'm sure it was really good to see everybody again, like a family reunion.
Well, I didn't see anybody except for Jonathan and Terry, because remember when I went back for Picard, it was just me on by myself on the ship. So, and it was still super, super duper COVID protocols. Like I had somebody come to the house to give me a test. Everybody went for a fitting. So this was like February of 22. So when people went back to work, they were working with reduced cast numbers as much as possible. So I saw Marina and LeVar in the makeup trailer, and I saw Jonathan and Terry on the set, but that's it. It wasn't like a big family reunion.
Yeah, and COVID changed so much of the world. Like when I watched you on the original Best of Both Worlds, the concept of distance learning was completely different. Like Wesley could jump on the computer and do his Starfleet Academy stuff, and nobody was the wiser. And then COVID hit, and I thought it was cool until I became the IT guy for literally all of my kids. I'm like, okay, maybe this isn't all it's cracked up to be, but we learned.
Yeah. I was lucky that during COVID, my son was doing remote learning with NYU, and so any tech support I needed, he was really, really helpful.
That's always helpful to have a kid who knows what they're doing.
Exactly.
So along that line, it was kind of up in the air what actually happened to Admiral Shelby.
I think it still is.
Like, did she really get whacked by the Borg, or is she going to come back? And like, I'm kind of crossing my fingers that we find out in any sort of Star Trek Legacy that may or may not be happening.
You know as much as I.
That's usually how it goes.
Yeah, no idea. I mean, I think they left it ambiguous so that lots of different kinds of things could happen.
And that's the beauty of Star Trek. Like, there's just so much wiggle room in everything.
Exactly.
So your dad was Brian Denehy.
That's right.
Awesome actor. I can't tell you how many awesome things I've seen him in. Did that direct what direction you wanted to go? Like, had you always wanted to be in acting, or is that something you discovered later?
My parents were really, really young when I was born. My mother was 19, my father was 21, and I have two younger sisters, and my earliest memory was putting on plays with them and acting out The Wizard of Oz, and we would play the musical albums. So it's an interesting question, which came first. We definitely grew up with movies and theater. We went to the theater. My father was a very, very driven actor. I think he would have always been performing in some form, even if he hadn't become a professional actor. But I have pictures and videos of home movies of me as a little kid constantly performing. And so I suppose it's probably genetic. Everybody says that, like my son's an actor. My son is a really good actor. He was in the Weird Al Yankovic biopic with Daniel Radcliffe as one of the guys in the band. And My husband is an actor, and we stand back in absolute awe of our son. Like, we think he's more talented than the two of us combined. So the genetic thing is very strong, I really believe. But I remember performing and seeking attention and wanting to be the center of attention before my dad ever even dreamed of being an actor. So, but then, you know, my father and his brother, who was also an actor, would perform whole scenes from On the Waterfront. You know, I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody. I grew up with that being normal. That was totally normal in my household. And my uncle was a theater major at Hofstra University, which is where I went, and I was a theater major there. And when I was a major there, all the teachers, he had all the same teachers that I had, and they just talked about him. He walked on water, how talented he was, how amazing he was. And so it's not the normal way of growing up for a lot of people, but this was normal for us, performing and acting and doing plays. And my father and brother were always doing children's theater. And I can remember being in Jack and the Beanstalk with him, and my uncle carrying me down a ladder because I was the golden goose, and doing dinner theater and on Long Island where we grew up, and community theater. My father formed a community theater group called Amityville Community Theater, or ACT, in Amityville where we grew up, and we were in ballet class. And I think one of the first shows I ever did, my father directed Shakespeare's The Tempest, and we were the fairies, and they did Tennessee Williams. Hold on one second. This is my son. He's flying to the airport. He's going to the airport, flying to Chicago, and I'm just going to say goodbye to him for a second.
Oh, absolutely.
I love you. Bye-bye. Safe flight.
Thank you.
Okay, talk to you soon. So he's on his way back to Chicago. And so when my father would do Cat on Hot Tin Roof, we were the No Neck Monsters. He directed Carousel. We were the Snow Children. We were the children, whenever he needed somebody, you know, kids in a show. And that was, you know, there's an old expression, born in a trunk. I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't say that, you know, we weren't on tour with him. But I was in the 8th grade. My father did a tour of Bus Stop, John Travolta and Anita Gillette, and we had John Travolta and his sisters over to our house when I was growing up, and went to the airport to say goodbye to them when they were flying up to Maine, I think. It was an unusual upbringing, not to us,
but definitely an exciting one from the sounds of it.
Not boring. Not boring. I will tell you, I don't ever want to romanticize this living, because we never knew if we were ever going to have any money. Financial stability was a myth. I remember one point we were living in a house that my father bought in West Gilgo Beach, 5 miles east of Jones Beach. And we had to move in with my grandparents and rent out the house. We couldn't afford to pay the mortgage payments. So there was not a lot of financial stability growing up, and that's hard on a family.
Oh, but very much so.
Yeah, super proud of him for pursuing his dream. And thank God it all worked out. It worked out really well, better than we ever could have imagined. But at the time, it was really, it was dicey. It was really hard on my mom, really hard.
Most definitely. And, you know, clearly, you know, a lot of people have this vision of people who are, you know, in Hollywood or on TV. It's like, oh, they must have it so good, and this, that, and the other thing. But you show that it's real, and it's gritty, and it's not always, you know, perfect, which just makes me like you that much more, because, you know, it shows that, you know what suffering is, because, you know, oh, we got to move in with grandma because we can't afford the house. I mean, you get it.
Well, everybody assumes that we were born with like a silver spoon in our mouth. We always believe, everybody assumes that we grew up with a Hollywood star's existence. So not like that. Every single time he finished a job, he thought, that's it, I'm never going to work again. We all feel that way. All of us. Anybody who doesn't say that truthfully is lying, because you always think, oh, this is the one where they find out I actually have no talent. The imposter syndrome is huge, especially in actors. And so he went from job to job to job, and he was really lucky, and he was very in demand. And so it all worked out, but like it didn't work out for his brother, my uncle. He never worked professionally, and he was a wonderful actor.
And clearly your uncle understood just as much as your dad did that sometimes happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, along that line, we had the SAG-AFTRA strikes last year, and we also had the writer's strike last year. And you were pretty active in the picketing, right?
I mean, I can walk to the Paramount gates, so I had very little excuse to not go up there. And it was really great going up there. It was easy for me, walking distance. It was very hot. And I also saw so many friends, so that made it bearable. I don't know if we moved the needle at all. It just seems Paramount then is going bankrupt and for sale. So I don't know what the full outcome is going to be, but it seems harder and harder for people like us who are below the line to just make a living. I can remember when I would do jobs, you'd make a film, and when you'd show up on the set, you get a per diem, you'd get spending money. I just did a movie recently, 2 years ago, and no per diem, and it just went to streaming, and I'm like, we used to get paid again. So if that was your only job for 5 years, you could count on making that salary in residuals again and again. And somebody like me could have a family and go on vacation and save up for a retirement. And it's looking like we can't do that anymore. We have to have more than one job. I have to have a knee replacement before the end of this year in order for my insurance to pay for it.
Wow. See,
Yeah.
and that's the things that those strikes were very much an example of. Like, a lot of people didn't realize that before, and that's, I think, why it's so very important that you guys actually have the unions that you're in, because like even when stuff happens, you still have somebody who's kind of like swinging for the fences for you, and they're doing the collective bargaining, and you guys have a voice.
Yes. It's not a hobby. Like, people watch movies and TV. They love them. And so the people who give up their skills, study for years, get MFAs, and like us, training, and we deserve to get paid a living wage in order to collaborate and create the art that the whole world enjoys. But there's people at the top who want to take all the profit and not share, and not say thanks to these actors, some of whose names you don't know. We have this product to market to the world, and they don't want to be fair about it. All we're saying is be fair.
Absolutely. And my Monday through Friday job, I'm a school bus driver. So I'm a Teamster. I mean, we have our union, and it does some really amazing stuff for us. I joke that I get paid remarkably, a lot to do remarkably little, but in the grand scheme of things, I'm doing a lot, and I have a union that backs me up, just like you guys do. So I totally get it.
Oh my God, school bus driver?
Absolutely.
You're an angel on earth. If something goes wrong, nobody thinks about school bus drivers until something goes wrong.
And then usually it's school bus driver, blah, blah, blah. And then you like throw what happened in later. I mean, right. I've had more close calls as a school bus driver than I have as a volunteer firefighter. And, wow. I told my fire chief one day, it's like, honestly, chief, my actual job is like a little more dangerous than this one. Because literally, like, as a firefighter, I get off the truck and I do the same thing every time, and it doesn't change. The only thing that changes is where I'm working. Yeah. When I'm at work as a school bus driver, the only thing that is the same is I get to work, I check out my bus, I make sure everything's working, and then I go. And my boss is like, "Okay, come back in one piece. Crossing fingers
Yep.
for you."
Yep. And we all know what angels children are on the bus and how sweet, docile, and focused. And no, you're an angel. That's amazing. You're a double angel being a volunteer firefighter.
I'm more inactive in that of late, but yeah, I still keep my certifications on that. So, but I appreciate you appreciating me. Um, so I'm gonna kind of touch a little bit on more Star Trek stuff
Okay.
in a minute. But you're also on doing stage acting currently, correct?
I haven't in a little bit since before the pandemic. I did a show on stage at San Diego Rep in 2019. Right, we closed right when everything was shutting down. Our last show was February 2nd, 2020. And it was called The Humans, and it was wonderful. It was a wonderful experience. So I love theater, and I would love to go back. I'd love to go back on stage. So
One thing I did not realize was it wasn't just Star Trek you were in. You were in Quantum Leap at one point as a guest.
yeah, one
Um,
episode. Yeah,
like a few crime dramas. What was it? The
Boston Legal.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And you got to work with William Shatner on that one,
With
sort of.
who?
William Shatner, or was that before he came in?
I think it was before he came in. It was so long ago. I can barely remember it. I think I'm on the witness stand being questioned, and I don't remember who questioned me. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no worries. It's all good. I'm lucky I can remember my name on a good day sometimes.
I think I would have remembered if it was James Spader. I don't think it was, but I can't remember anything. So I did, yeah, The Medium and Mentalist. The Mentalist.
That's what I was thinking. Yes.
Yeah, that was fun because I was the bad guy, and I never get to be the bad guy. Sorry, spoiler alert.
Like spoiler alert on reruns.
Yeah,
So
I did it.
So as far as the character of Shelby is concerned, let's say that the producers had said, okay, well, we're going to keep Patrick Stewart like as Locutus. They're not going to be able to rescue him, so now we're stuck. Did you think that at that point they would have continued on with TNG and you would have been the new number one, or how do you think that would have played out had they not had Patrick Stewart rescued?
I think that seems like the most obvious choice. Yes. Yeah, it makes sense. I think that I don't know. It seems like part two wrapped up really quickly. I feel like, Shelby just went away. I have no idea. I mean, I think that when you're phasing out a series regular, okay, I'm talking about the reality part of making a TV show as opposed to what was happening in the story. What was happening in the story, when we filmed part one, we did not see part two. We had no idea what was coming. So summer, when everybody was waiting for part two, so were we. We had absolutely no idea how it was going to wrap up until we went back after 3 months. And so in terms of the show, you're not going to get rid of a beloved series regular without a lot of different things being put into place. That's not something they would have suddenly decided over the summer, for instance. But in terms of the story, Jonathan and I, when we were doing season part one, we didn't know if Riker and Shelby were going to become loathed enemies, and one is a villain, one's a good guy. We didn't know if they were going to end up in bed together. We had no idea. We were like, is Shelby a Borg in disguise, infiltrating the Enterprise and the brain trust there? We had no idea. So we were trying to plant little seeds of every eventuality making sense later on. For instance, when you would see me make these little smirks, It was in case I turn out to be a villain. And when we were doing our head-to-head scene, we also tried to play heat there in case it turns out that we fall for each other. So it was a grab bag. We had no idea. I think that's a really important consideration when you watch both. That, and when we did season 1, we didn't have a clue what was going to happen. I mean, part 1, we didn't have a clue how it was going to play out, how it was going to resolve itself.
See, now I want to go and fire up my Paramount Plus just to watch those episodes and kind of like pick it apart, which I've gotten better at doing this particular end of things. But as a dad, I have a 4-year-old little girl who loves Star Trek just like I do. So
Great.
I'm trying to find episodes that are appropriate for her because she's still 4, and like there is some scariness to Star Trek, but then there's other stuff where you're like, it's like, do I want her to watch that? Because I'm not sure I want her to pick up that nuance quite yet. Like there's so many different avenues we could take. Like right now she likes watching the Strange New Worlds musical.
Aww.
And that little girl can sing every song on the album. It kind of frightens me.
Yeah, well, you better be prepared for a performer.
She's either going to be a performer or a lawyer, because the questions she asks, oh my goodness.
Yes.
But along that line, let me think back to that. So was Shelby designed to be like the person you love to hate, or was she more of a kind of like throw the unknown in?
Throw the unknown in. You mean
like was she supposed to be like designed as a character that was designed that you love to hate her, or was she designed more as lack of a better term, probably designed as somebody who like was there to mix it up a little bit on the show?
It's hard for me to answer that because I'm not the writer. And like I said, when we got part 1, we did not see part 2. Jonathan and I had lots of conversations about, I mean, I was 28. It was like literally my first job in Hollywood. I was so young, and I met him and he was like, let me show you the ropes. And I was like, And so in order to sustain interest in a character, you want it to be changing and evolving, and maybe to be, you feel one way about her in one scene and then a completely different way about her in the second scene. And so intriguing and make the audience curious about her. But also, if she had become, let's say, a series regular, in order to do that and sustain that, it needs to be kind of close to who I am, so that my instinct, aspirations, dreams, fears, and intuition matches Shelby's if it's going to go on for a long time. So we had lots of conversations about how, and also he says in the script, she reminds me of me when I was young. So we had to plant a lot of seeds. And what was interesting for me was this was a woman who didn't care if people liked her or not. She saw a solution to a problem, and everybody, with all their discussions and meetings and planning and hand-wringing, was stopping me from taking action to solve this problem. And at the time, 30 years ago, it was more in style for a woman to talk about ideas, let everybody else hear the ideas, and wait for the man to have the same ideas and get all the credit for those ideas. And I think Shelby was a groundbreaker in that, hell no, let's go. I'm taking data and I'm going down to the island. I'm going down to the planet without permission. I'll apologize later. But I'm trying to save lives, and you guys are just wasting my time. And I think that pissed off a few people. And when I started doing conventions 30 years ago, I would be sitting at a table with a stack of pictures, and people would come up to me and go, I hated you. I hated you. You were such a bitch. why were you such a bitch to Riker? And my answer was I right?
And they're like, well, yeah, kind of.
Was I right? But there's this protocol. I'm supposed to be deferential to him because he's the first officer, and he's older than me, and he was there before me, and he's an authority figure. And it was like, screw that. I'm trying to save the ship, save the galaxy. You brought me here for a reason. Now get out of my way. You're in my way.
And clearly, that's how she became an admiral before Captain Riker did. Because she was a no BS, take no garbage, let's get the job done kind of character.
Yeah, you didn't bring me on here to become everybody's friend and kiss asses. You brought me here because I see a solution to the problem, and it's interesting because when I go to conventions now, I never hear "I hated you," "I thought you were a bitch." You're, oh my God, I loved you so much. I loved how smart you were and how you just took charge, and that you were right, and you were forceful, and you were fierce, and you're such a great role model for my daughter. That's the kind of stuff I hear now.
And I got almost the same answer from Todd Stashwick last season when I interviewed him, and I said I didn't like Liam Shaw from the first time I met him. It's like, I thought he was pompous. I thought he was rough. I thought he was a stick in the mud. Said, and then you go and make me like him. It's like, thanks a lot, Todd. Like, now I like him.
Yeah, and I think people nowadays are, thank God things have changed, where people can make room for women to have the loudest voice in the room. About time.
And I've noticed that, like, people reference you, or they reference Captain Janeway's character, and there's a lot louder female characters with a lot more substance to them.
Yeah.
And between you and Kate Mulgrew and Sonequa Martin Green, you guys have kind of paved the way for that level of respect. You look
had that vision from the very get-go, that if it's really going to be an equitable world, then everybody's voice matters. It's interesting. I think the times have changed so much. My other son, not this guy, but my other son, William, is a filmmaker, and he couldn't believe that I'd never seen the movie Heat. So he's a member of the American Cinematheque, and we went out last week to see the movie Heat, which had been made in 1995, around the same time as I did Star Trek, and I'd never seen it. Robert De Niro and Al Pacino. And it was so interesting because the women in that movie are purely ornamental. If they're not ornamental, like Amy Brenneman, oh yes, I just met you, but you can come back to my house, my fabulous house that I'm renting on a graphic artist salary above the hills with a view of Hollywood side, and we'll have a romp in the hay. And of course, I'll run off to New Zealand with you, and I'll sit in the car and patiently wait while the whole world blows up. Or the wife who's popping the Xanax and the weed, who has an ex who's not paying any attention to her suicidal daughter, and it has changed so much. You would never get away with that now in a movie.
I mean, and that's the thing I've noticed is that, like, even something as innocent as a Mel Brooks movie, it's like people look at it like, did he really just say that?
Yeah.
Like, and the running joke now, it's fall, so now of course it's pumpkin spice season, and some brilliant graphic artist went and made a meme from Blazing Saddles. I'm like, did they really just say that? What? Like, people are so afraid of being offended that nobody offends anybody now. Like, hold on a second here. It's like,
there's a line. There is a line. It has to be really funny. It has to be like worth a laugh.
Absolutely.
There's a difference punching down and punching up. But yeah, no. So things have changed so much with women's. Like now, you'd make Heat, and one of them would be a like the cop would be a female and the criminal a male, or vice versa. So that's what I want to see. So yeah, it's really
Well,
so in terms of Shelby's design, I can't say what the writers had in mind. I did audition for it and they saw something. And I think playing, it's almost like you have a knife and both edges of the knife, that she's cutting and quick and cold, but also a human being, and that's what you have to do. You have to play a human being through all 360 degrees of a human being.
Well, I, for one, and I'm sure that my viewers will probably agree, you pulled that role off with spades. And when we saw you in season 3, I'm not gonna lie, I got really excited. I'm like, oh my god, all these characters from TNG are here. Like, you had Michelle Forbes, who played Ensign Rowe, and I'm fairly sure they can't bring her back. Like, just a hunch, because she blew up. I mean, she crashed her shuttlecraft into a warp nacelle. Fairly sure
Right.
there's no walking back from that.
But Michelle and I were, Michelle came to my wedding in Ireland. Michelle and I were, I think it was like our first job. We were both on the Guiding Light in 1985 and we shared a dressing room. She's a close friend of mine.
And you were both on Star Trek. Wow.
Yeah. You can't swing a cat in this town without hitting somebody on Star Trek.
And that's the thing. Like, you were mentioning that your kids and you probably had like the acting gene, but I was going somewhere with this. Oh yeah, so as far as like the acting gene is concerned, I've heard people say that you've gotten there when you're either on Star Trek or you're on some other show. I actually had yes, ER.
Or Grey's Anatomy. I auditioned probably 10 times for ER and never got cast. Yeah. And LA Law. I auditioned for that show so many times.
Oh, you would have been perfect for that.
I know. I know.
Well, I won't keep you any longer. This has been an amazing interview. I appreciate you taking the time out to speak with us. I'm going to go ahead and end the clip. If you can hang out for a second in the green room, I'm going to just kind of give you the breakdown. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Elizabeth Denehy. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Hey, everybody. Did you know Jupiter Station has a GoFundMe set up? We currently have a GoFundMe set up, and with hope, you, my viewers, can help. We are trying to upgrade Jupiter Station with a new laptop because our current computer is on its last leg, a new camera because our camera is on its last leg, and we need to upgrade the services that we utilize, like StreamYard and our website. So I've established a GoFundMe page with an ultimate goal of approximately $20,000. It can be found at GoFundMe.com under Help TJ Enhance Jupiter Station Podcast. Let me show you folks what we got going on here. So that's what we got. So far, we got $10 raised out of our ultimate goal. You can share, you can donate, you can become an early supporter. And GoFundMe protects your donations. So if there's any question on where your money's going, we're right there. So that's what we got, folks. We can get this podcast on the road again. Thanks a lot, folks.